They said the law was the backbone of the kingdom. But in medieval England, the law was more like a whip, and it could tear into you long before you stood in front of a judge. If you were accused of a crime, truth didn't matter much. What mattered was that the people saw you suffer. And in a world where fear kept order better than justice, your body became the message. It wasn't just about killing you. It was about making sure your death or your pain was remembered long after the crowd went home. Some punishments were so drawn out, so humiliating, that people who survived them wished they hadn't. This is a world where the punishment didn't end when you stopped breathing, because sometimes they kept going. The pillory, a prison you couldn't escape from. For petty thieves, liars, and cheats, the pillory was waiting. A wooden frame with holes for your head and hands. It trapped you upright in the center of town. You couldn't move, you couldn't wipe your face, and you couldn't hide from the crowd. The official sentence might be 3 hours, but time in the pillory didn't pass like normal hours. The air was thick with the smell of the marketplace. Fish, mud, and unwashed bodies. Flies landed on your skin and stayed. And then came the people. They'd throw anything they could find. Rotten vegetables, mud, dead animals. Sometimes stones. You could lose teeth or even die before your time was up. The worst part? The guards didn't stop them. They often joined in. The crowd's cruelty was part of the punishment. And when you were released, covered in filth and bruises, your shame walked with you. Trial by ordeal, God decides your guilt. Before there were juries you could hope to sway, there was God, or at least there was the church's version of him. If you were accused of a crime and there wasn't enough evidence, you could face a trial by ordeal. They believed God would protect the innocent. The problem was, he rarely did. 1. Ordeal meant plunging your arm into boiling water to grab a stone at the bottom. Another meant holding a red-hot iron bar and walking 3 steps. Your wounds would be wrapped and checked after 3 days. If they were healing cleanly, you were innocent. If they were festering, guilty. But in a time when infection could set in within hours, and clean healing was almost impossible without medicine, the outcome was all but decided before you touched the water or the iron. These trials weren't meant to find the truth. They were meant to show the crowd that justice had been served, even if it meant punishing the innocent. Branding, wearing your crime forever. Some punishments never left your skin. Branding was used for thieves, vagrants, and other undesirable people the authorities wanted everyone to spot on sight. They'd heat an iron rod until it glowed, then press it into your flesh, often on the hand, arm, or even the face. The letter marked you forever. T for thief, V for vagrant, F for felon. It was more than just pain. It was a life sentence without a prison. Once branded, every village, every market, every road you walked told your story before you opened your mouth. People could refuse to serve you, hire you, or even let you inside their homes. And in a world where survival depended on belonging to a community, the brand was almost as deadly as a rope. The drunkard's cloak, punishment as humiliation. Not every crime led to blood or broken bones. But in medieval England, even a lesser punishment could strip a person of dignity. If you were caught drunk in public, they might lock you into the drunkard's cloak, a heavy wooden barrel with holes cut for your head and arms. You'd be forced to walk the streets while people jeered, laughed, and threw things. It wasn't about making you sober. It was about turning you into a walking joke. And the weight of the barrel made every step slow and exhausting. So the humiliation lasted as long as possible. Hanging, drawing, and quartering. This was the fate of those accused of treason, a punishment so severe it became infamous across Europe. First, you'd be tied to a wooden frame and dragged through the streets by a horse to the place of execution. People would follow, shouting, throwing filth, and sometimes striking you as you passed. Once there, you'd be hanged, but not until death. You'd be cut down while still alive. And then came the drawing. Your abdomen opened, your organs removed, sometimes burned before your eyes. Finally, your body would be chopped into 4 parts, and your head displayed on a spike above the city gates. The point wasn't just to kill you. It was to make your death a warning, so large it could be seen from miles away. Even nobles, who might have expected more dignity in death, were not always spared this. Treason erased all privilege. Stocks, the slow burn of public shame. Stocks were like the pillory's cruel cousin. Instead of standing, you sat with your feet locked into wooden boards. It might sound easier, but it wasn't. Sitting still for hours in cold, wet weather could leave your legs numb and your back aching. The crowd still came to mock and throw things. And unlike the pillory, stocks were often placed in the busiest part of town, markets, fairs, or crossroads, so the most people possible could see you. The humiliation didn't just sting while you were there. It followed you home, into your work, and into every conversation afterward. Why punishment looked like this? It's easy to think medieval England was just cruel for the sake of cruelty. But these punishments had a purpose. Fear, with no police force, no fast courts, and a population spread out across villages. The law relied on terror to keep order. The more public and humiliating the punishment, the stronger the warning to everyone else. And it worked. People feared the brand, the stocks, and the gallows more than the crime itself. But fear isn't justice. And in this world, one wrong word, one false accusation, could turn you from an ordinary citizen into the day's entertainment. Pricking, a death without blood. Some punishments were quiet, but no less cruel. If a prisoner refused to speak, especially in cases involving conspiracy, they could face pricking. A sharp iron tool would be used to pierce the skin in dozens of small places, over and over, targeting nerves and muscles. It wasn't meant to kill quickly. It was meant to break the mind, to make you talk, to make you beg. A person could survive days of this, but every movement afterward reminded them of what had been done. It left no grand spectacle like the gallows, but in some ways that made it worse. It was pain hidden from the crowd, designed for control, not entertainment. Peine forte et dure, press to death. Refusing to enter a plea in court could seal your fate in a way few could imagine. Under peine forte et dure, the strong and hard punishment, you would be stripped, laid on the ground, and a board placed on your chest. Then stones would be piled on top, one by one, until your ribs cracked, your breathing stopped, or you changed your plea. It was rare, but when it happened, it was unforgettable, not just for the victim, but for everyone who heard the story afterward. Some endured it to death rather than face trial. The reason? In some cases, refusing a plea meant your property could pass to your family instead of being seized by the crown. Dying under the weight was seen as the last act of defiance. Whipping, pain in the open air. Public whipping was a sentence meant to sting twice, once in the flesh and once in the pride. The condemned would be tied to a post or cart, stripped to the waist, and lashed across the back. Sometimes it was done in the marketplace. Sometimes the criminal was dragged through the streets so more people could watch. The sound of the whip cutting the air carried far, pulling people from their homes to see. And the punishment didn't always end with the lashes. The open wounds made daily life a torment for weeks, long after the crowd had gone. The ducking stool, the warder's judgment. For women accused of being scolds, those who spoke too freely or too often, there was the ducking stool. The accused would be strapped into a chair at the end of a long wooden beam, swung out over a river or pond, and plunged into the water. It was humiliating, exhausting, and dangerous. In cold weather, the shock of the water could be deadly, and the onlookers treated it as entertainment, laughing as the chair rose and fell, ignoring the gasp for air. It wasn't about justice. It was about silencing. The walk of shame. Sometimes a criminal didn't need to be locked up or beaten. Humiliation could do the job just as well. Men might be forced to parade through the streets wearing chains. Women might carry heavy stones. Or thieves could be made to march holding signs declaring their crime. It wasn't a private punishment. Every step was public. Every face in the crowd was another witness. And in a world where reputation was everything, this walk could ruin you more completely than a prison cell. Execution as theater. By the late Middle Ages, public executions had become a kind of grim ritual. They drew crowds like festivals, children on shoulders, vendors selling food, and people jostling for the best view. The condemned would be brought out, sometimes in a cart, sometimes walking under guard. There might be a final speech or a prayer, but once the signal was given, the crowd fell silent. A hanging, a beheading, even a burning. It all unfolded under the open sky, in the eyes of the people. The moment the body fell or the axe struck, the silence would break into a roar. Some cheered, some prayed, some just turned and went home. It was not just a sentence carried out. It was a lesson the authorities wanted burned into the memory of everyone watching. Medieval England didn't need posters, newspapers, or broadcasts to keep people in line. They had the human body, and they knew how to use it. A punishment was never just about the person who committed the crime. It was about everyone else. About making the streets safer not by kindness, but by fear. For the thief in the pillory, the branded vagrant, the traitor on the gallows, or the woman on the ducking stool, the message was the same. This is what happens when you break the rules. And no one, not the rich, not the poor, not even the noble, could be sure they were safe from it. In a world where justice was public, pain was performance, and shame could outlast a lifetime, you didn't have to be guilty to be afraid. You just had to be seen.